1, 2, 3. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University, and we're back. I'm an author, psychologist, and speaker. Every week we talk about how to love yourself, others, and a higher nature. We have a lot of great guests, and we're very fortunate to be at the LA Times Festival of Books, live at USC, and we're having a lot of fun. A lot of people are walking here and looking at us and talking to us. And we have an amazing guest today. We have a woman here whose name is Julie Albright. She's a professor and sociologist, specializing in digital culture and communications. She has master's degrees in social and systemic studies and a dual doctorate in sociology and marriage and family therapy. She's a keynote speaker and an author of Left to Their Own Devices, How Digital Natives Are Reshaping the American Dream. Julie, welcome aboard. It's good to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm very excited because this is a very pertinent topic, the idea of digital transformation and revolution in our society and how it affects people psychologically. But Julie, when I was thinking about this show, I actually came up with a little bit of a rhyme, I want to tell you. Okay, It goes like this. Me and my little screen. I used to have to go to the bookstores. I don't anymore. I used to have to go to the grocery store. I don't anymore. I used to have to go to the video store. I don't anymore. I used to have to go to the singles bar. I don't anymore. I used to dine alone and they called me lonely. They don't anymore. Now I have a friend, my little screen. What do I need anything else for?
No, that's good.
Okay. Now that encapsulates maybe the positives and the negatives of this idea. So tell us how this is happening, this idea of the digital revolution.
Well, over time, computers originally were developed by the Department of Defense. They were made so that we could keep communications going even in the face of nuclear warfare.
Yes.
And that's what it was all about. But over time, in fact, I just met with a guy who made the first consumer internet provider back in Boston called The World. And more and more people got online and commercial services came about like America Online, where people started communicating and finding each other and mating and dating and doing all those things online.
But you also talk about almost, I don't know if it's a negative aspect, you talk about hyperconnectivity and untethered societies. So like people are not really connected to institutions like church, marriage, or politics anymore.
Right.
And even long-term employment. It's like you call them digital nomads. They're traveling all over the place through their little internet. So is that good or bad?
Yeah, we're in an interesting moment where, as you mentioned, I call it coming untethered, that young people in particular, digital natives that grew up in a world where there always was an internet, are unhooking from traditional social structures like getting married or buying a home, buying a car, going to church, joining a political party, all these sorts of things. And it's sort of set them adrift in a way. There's a lot of freedom there, which is fun. You can sort of work from anywhere, work in Bali, work at home in your pajamas. You can meet anyone, you can job hop. But there's some downsides to all that freedom as well that are starting to show up.
Now, let me tell you some terms. You tell me what these means, because you have very kind of interesting terms. You say something called digital tribalism, and I'm thinking of these people that like the same thing on Facebook. What does that mean?
Yeah. So we have sort of a breakdown in mass media, which was tied to the deregulation of news media that happened around in the 80s. So now news is branded. You have more conservative or more liberal news media, and that sort of echoes down into social media, where people gather with people that are like them, like the birds of a feather rule.
Yes.
And their beliefs and their values are similar. And oftentimes now you've probably seen on Facebook, if someone's of a different ilk, a different opinion or attitude, they get blocked. So that's kind of what's happening now, where you get these information bubbles. That's why the digital tribalism, where these tribes are coalescing around beliefs, around ideas, around ideologies, and oftentimes other alternative viewpoints are sort of edited out of that, which can also bring some negative consequences like groupthink.
Yes. You talked also about fake news and fake people. Is there such a thing as that?
Yeah. Well, it's easy to create a fake person now, and we're starting to see that, particularly with foreign actors like Russia have created bots that look like real people. They have profiles on social media. They sort of lie in wait until they're activated around maybe a political idea or something where they're going to create division in society. So it's getting harder and harder to tell real from fake now online, because you don't have the person in front of you to sort of fact check if it's a real person.
Exactly. Now you have almost like a whole list of negatives here. You talk about, internet as addiction, number one.
Yeah.
Because it's like chemicals, where you get this pleasurable response when people like you on Facebook.
Yeah.
You have people get depressed, I guess, when the internet is off, like they cry and things like that. You say someone called 911 one time.
Yeah.
And then even loneliness. Our mission at Love University is to help eradicate loneliness, and we help with the podcast and other things. But in some ways, I think you said it's a pseudo connection that you're creating. It's not really a real connection.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would think that with all the choices that online offers, particularly for things like building relationships,
Yes.
there's something called a paradox of choice going on, where the more choices that we have, people aren't choosing. So it turns out now that 65% of high school kids have never been in a romantic relationship, and half of adults in America now are not in a romantic relationship. So even by age 25, the majority have not been in a romantic relationship for 3 months duration. So we're seeing a breakdown in committing and committed relationships, because there's this notion that maybe someone's out there a little hotter, a little better,
okay.
a little, maybe I won't fight with them, maybe
Yes.
they make a little more money,
Okay.
and so people just keep on churning, seeking and swiping on dating apps,
Yes.
and they're actually not settling on any one person.
Interesting. I think
It's
they
called
call it
choice overload.
choice overload. I think they also call it the hookup culture. Like,
Yeah.
you can get sex, but then there's not a real relationship afterwards, and that commitment is missing. And also, I think you say that things are too easy, because you have so many choices. Everything's
Yeah.
made for you in that sense.
It's kind of interesting. Again, you would think that with all these choices at your fingertips, that people would be matching up and finding love, but it becomes gamified. It's almost like dating as a sport. So people don't end up committing, and at the end of the day, despite going on 3 dates a day, which some people are doing,
Wow.
they end up lonely because they're holding an empty bag at the end of it. They haven't really settled on anyone, and they don't have any depth or meaning to those relationships. They're just sort of easy come, easy go.
Interesting. Now, I don't know what generation you're from, but I'm a little old school, and I don't remember cell phones. I don't remember any of this stuff. And I used to love to read.
Yeah.
I still do. So I like the idea of taking a break from the stuff, having a social media fast. I tell people, take 4 hours a day, turn off your phones, because they're in love with their phones. But this young man over here, Andrew, is a millennial. And Andrew, are we funny daddies, or is this a real thing?
Yeah, I would say it's a real thing. Our generation today is very consumed in being able to get everything now through information, through Google. Kids in school look up answers on Google. It's just what you do, I have a question. What would you say is the fine line? Where do we draw the fine line in terms of how we use technology to aid us and not digress as we move forward?
Yeah, and that's the thing I do want to say.
Good question.
My new book in this project isn't about bashing millennials, or it's not about bashing technology per se at all. I love technology as much as the next guy. I spent my whole career looking at it. I work with eHarmony and developed their product. I've been enmeshed in this since day one. But we need to create some sacred spaces without technology, like, for example, having lunch or dinner with each other without a device, spending more time in physical activities outside. Only 6% of kids are playing outside now, and 93% of adults are spending all their time indoors. So this idea that we're disconnecting from the body and from nature, we need to do these things because we're having some physical and mental health issues coming up. So it's not about not having tech, it's about just setting some time aside where we're connecting with each other, ourselves, our bodies, and nature, I would say.
And also, this young man, Andrew, I think you're a millennial, you're in your 20s, early 20s. The idea that in business, people say now you can start a business overnight. YouTube can make you rich, sensation. Isn't that a great advantage? You can be in your pajamas in Hawaii, making millions. Is that an advantage for technology?
Definitely. I think it's dual-sided. Yeah, the ability to start a business nowadays, I think, is easier. But also, along with that, you have to realize that 90% of small businesses and entrepreneurs fail, and they continue to fail. So knowing that and using the resources that you have, I think we are in a better state. Just being wise of the fact that you're going to fail is also important as well.
Yeah.
So give me your cell phone, and it's gone for today. Can you do that?
It's going to be kind of hard. I'll try, though.
I don't think so. How many people would really give up their cell phone for a whole day? Could you start a campaign like that?
I know, that's my thing is baby steps. Start
okay.
small.
Oh,
I mean, if you have a meal without your phone, that's a win in my view.
Okay, so people are texting each other as they're talking, sitting next to each other. Now,
Yeah.
what's that about? at restaurants.
Well, it's addictive in a sense. It's fun to use your phone. It's fun to see what new thing comes up. It's kind of like the slot machines in Vegas. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes the content's exciting or interesting.
Right.
Sometimes it's boring. It's the exact same dynamic as a slot machine. And we know there's such thing as gambling addiction. So the same processes are now baked into things like Instagram or Facebook, where you're scrolling along, and that keeps people coming back for more. So it's hard to pull away from these things.
That's a good point. If you remember psychology, I know you're a professor, the variable ratio of reinforcement is that you reinforce certain times, but you don't know how much you have to put into it to get it back.
Yeah, the random reinforcement.
And that's the most addictive.
That's
like,
right.
Like a slot machine, right?
That's
'Cause
exactly
you
what
can pull
it
it 100
is.
times, you
Exactly
can get it, or
what
it could
it
be
is.
the next time. So, someone emails you get a nice email or something.
That's right.
But the other thing is, I think this is a real big one. You used the term no latency life.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't sure what that meant, but I thought, does that mean impatience? Like you don't want to wait for things?
Yeah. So the tech folks that run these networks, like the Facebooks and the Ubers and the Twitters, the latency means the time that it takes for you to get that video or load that video on your phone or something.
Okay.
And young people are increasingly impatient. They'll only wait a couple seconds or go on to the next. If the Uber driver's going to take too long, they'll look at Lyft to see if it'll get there faster.
Okay.
So digital life is churning so fast that young, particularly people that are immersed in these technologies, expect other aspects of life to churn that fast.
Yes.
And when it doesn't, then they get impatient. So there's a changing relationship in the pace of life because of digital connectivity.
So the idea of delayed gratification, is that going out the window? Like, you got to work hard for things. It's going to take you years to develop it.
Yeah.
Or they want it now, but they want to get it.
Right. Don't care how I want it now. The gal from Willy Wonka was just ahead of her time with that song. But yeah, we've asked some of the students, hey, what are your 5-year plans? My mentor is a CTO of Chevron. He asked his students about that, and they looked at him like he was crazy. 5 years, that's like an eon. So,
Exactly.
They can't even imagine that. So the time has really compressed. That's the other aspect
Right.
of
'Cause I
value
think
changes
you say
that are
that
going on.
people say, well, you're stuck in the past, in technology-wise. But you said technology is changing much faster these days. You said it took 30 years for the car to be penetrated in the market.
Right.
And other stuff take a month.
Right.
So is that the idea that things are spinning out of control, you think?
Yeah, things are spinning a lot faster. So on the horizon, we have things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation. And based on the spin-up time for majority adoption for these other technologies, they'll be on our near horizon before we know it. So we have to think about the disruptive factor to the workforce and to people when they sort of displace workers, for example, on the horizon.
Interesting. This is something I kind of agree with you. The idea of parents on their phone with little kids, and I know some parents even give their little kids phones. And you told me there's babies nowadays that are doing potty training on their phones or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird, right? So, I mean, is it possible? Can I say to a kid, no phone until you're 10 years old or 12? Or is that going to be hard to do? Or 14?
Yeah, it is hard to do. The doctors are saying, no phones under age 2. But if you look at some of the private schools, for example, that tech executives send their kids to in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, they don't have technology in the schools. They're doing things like art.
Right.
They're doing things like movement and dance. They're
Right.
singing. They're playing musical instruments. They're doing all these analog skills. So that should tell you something if the tech executives don't have a tech in front of their kids all day long.
Right. Could you tell me that, first of all, you show that you're not attentive to your child, because you're on your phone. And also, you're modeling the behavior for them to do the same thing.
Right.
And that's not good either.
Yeah, kids want parents' attention, and now the parents are getting so caught up with the digital technologies that they're not paying that attention. So, yeah, parents and teachers, any kind of authority person needs to model good behavior. I call it digital hygiene, really.
Okay. What does that mean, digital hygiene?
Well, the idea of when it's appropriate to use your device, when it isn't. Like, for example, let's have a family dinner without devices, and start that as the precedent, and that's the rule in the house.
Right.
Don't charge devices in kids' bedrooms at night, so they're checking them in the middle of the night.
Yes,
Things like that.
Yeah, I kind of hate having a phone around me when I'm sleeping, but a lot of people like that.
Well, it's distractive,
Yes.
and there's a global sleep crisis going on now because of all these technologies. People are checking them. Kids are texting more than 30 times after going to bed in the middle of the night.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
But texting who? Their friends?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Now, I'm curious, how did you get this? Because were you a digital, fanatic before and then you changed, or you never, how did you get into this whole thing?
Well, I've been looking at digital transformation of society since the beginning of my career. I looked at online dating and wrote my dissertation on that.
Wow.
Followed up with working with eHarmony and did research and things in that area. And then I started working around energy. We wrote a big grant about changing energy and sustainability behavior using phones and games and things like that. So we wrote a big grant.
With eHarmony, though, do your results indicate it's good to online date or not? Because I'm sure if they're paying you, they want you to say yes, right?
Yeah. Well, for some people it is good. They're meeting their soulmates online, but for others, as online dating has moved along with the technologies, with phones and things like Tinder, as I said, it becomes gamified. So you're just swiping. Some people are just indiscriminately swiping everybody to see whoever connects with them, and then they just go out on hundreds of dates. So it's not ever about meeting someone. It's just almost a game at that point.
So do you think marriage is a lost institution now? People don't want to get married.
Well,
as a result of the technology, giving you all these different things.
Yeah. So there's two sides to that coin. One is young people aren't getting married at the rates anywhere near previous generations. But those that are in the millennial group, for example, are choosing someone that's more compatible. They're marrying later. So later marriages with someone compatible tend to be more stable. So that's the good news.
Okay.
When they are marrying, it's a better match. So let's hope that continues.
So there are two sides of that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how do we, I think our guest Andrew asked the question, how do we integrate it so it works together well, the good and the bad? Are there some tips that you could give us, our listeners, to do that in their life?
Yeah.
Because I think you mentioned that now it's 24/7, work and personal has been blurred.
Yes.
So you can't really take a break, right? You're at midnight, someone texts you to do something.
Yeah.
So how do we, give us some tips on how to do that?
Right. Well, we were just talking about working remotely, for example. There's a whole untethered infrastructure that's cropping up now. Co-living spaces where you work and live with others. For people that are single. The idea of co-working spaces like WeWork, and those are cropping up all around the world. So you'll have somewhere to go, you can meet other people, because at the end of the day...
So that's good, you're saying?
Yeah, traveling alone can be very lonely. Okay. So these things are cropping up to respond to the untethered worker, for example, untethered generation, to provide some sense of friendship, community, connection, and that's what we need to create in society, some new anchor points, new connectivity, new community for people who are pulling away from some of the traditional ones.
So it is a good way in some ways to maybe help with loneliness if you get people to meet each other live.
Yeah, yes.
Not just on the screen,
yes.
but actually go to a community
a difference. Yes.
and start to meet each other.
Yes.
And any other tips, ways we can do this better? Can we take, like you said, a fast, like every day or something? Or
I would set aside sacred spaces
like
without phones.
Things?
Not necessarily, but it could be spiritual things, yes, spiritual pursuits, but have a dinner without cell phones. Go out in nature for a little bit of time without a phone intruding between you and that experience. Do physical activities, not just simulated ones on a screen. Because these are long evolved ways of being human that have sort of been thrown out the window. And we need to reclaim some of these things and strike a balance between the analog and the digital now.
Yeah, so if you become a sedentary, nerdy society, what's going to happen in the future?
Right.
Everyone's in their own head.
Yeah.
No one really goes out. I mean, you guys are sailors, I think, right? You love to sail.
Yeah.
So you're not going to sail anymore, right? If you're in your virtual reality.
Yeah. That's like that movie Ready Player One, and the thing that people don't realize is that's a dystopian view of the future. It's not a utopian
when you say dystopian,
view.
You mean a bad thing?
Yeah, a bad thing. They're in a virtual world all day long, and the analog world around them is sort of burned out. And that's what you don't want.
Andrew, has your mind been changed, Mr. Millennial? Are you giving up your cell phone, or can you integrate it better?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see both sides. I think that integration is important, but being interactive with integration, a lot of times people look up stuff and they're not really learning and understanding what they're looking at. So I think that taking a clearer view at things, and like you said, taking time away from your phone, reading a book maybe for 4 hours, going out in nature, keeping yourself engaged, and then using it to aid you, I think is the way to go.
Is that really true, what you're telling us? Are you going to change your ways?
Definitely. I feel integration is important, but you still need your space. You still need, it's important to have it.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, it's been wonderful having you on board today.
Thank
You're
you
very
so much.
revelational material here.
Thanks for having me.
And one good thing, I see people walking around. This is a book fair. I see a lot of people reading books.
I know, it's exciting.
And someone told me that people don't read books anymore.
There's a resurgence of paper books now.
Really?
People love that tactility, and
Are you serious?
and that's the thing. Yeah.
Now, why
They thought it was all going to go toward Kindle, and at first it did with the shock of the new and
Sure.
excitement.
Exactly.
But now people are returning back to paper books. There's a pleasure in tactility and the feel of a book.
I see. So it's a natural feeling. People want to be able to see things and experience them.
And feel things.
Feel things.
Yeah.
Now, Julie, tell us a little bit about your stuff, because I know you have an exciting project coming out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have a new book. It's coming out Tuesday. It's called Left to Their Own Devices, How Digital Natives Are Reshaping the American Dream. So it's going to be available wherever books are sold, online, and we're on a big tour. Devicesbook.com. You can see where we're going to be and come out and meet. It'd be great to see everyone.
It'd be wonderful. And is there any other, so your website, what's your website again, Julie?
Devicesbook.com.
Okay. Do you have any other stuff you do, like any speaking, or other people can get a hold of you for other things?
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking engagements for corporate events and have some great events coming up. So next I'll be up in Silicon Valley for a couple of events, and then
That
I'm
should be
going on a
interesting.
nation
The
tour
Silicon
too.
Valley people, right?
Yeah,
The people that are in
they've
technology.
been embracing this, which
Really?
is amazing. I was
Okay.
a little nervous, but
Right.
they think about the technology aspect. They don't think
Oh.
about the context. And
okay.
now that I'm talking about that, it's really changing their perspective on what they do, which is
Interesting.
exciting.
So bringing kind of a human flavor to the technology.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
And Julie, we'd love to have you on again at Love University. You know,
Thank
we
you so
really
much
gather a
for
lot.
having me.
Maybe we can even collaborate on some ideas. I know
Yeah.
you're close to my location, I think.
Sure, yeah.
So we'd love to have you on. And then
Great.
Love University students, we've enjoyed having you listen to us today.
Yeah.
Every week we'll learn something new. This is Dr. Alex Avila. If you want to write to us at loveuniversity.love, like us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So everyone put away your books, notepads, iPads in some people's cases, or old-fashioned ways. Until next time, this is Dr. Alex Avila.